Today I'm going to attempt to answer that age-old question once and for all: should decking be installed grooves up or grooves down? Hiya folks, and welcome back to the show. And as promised, as part of when we built this whole decking project, I thought I would give you my kind of interpretation of whether or not the grooves of the decking should go downwards or upwards, because it is a bone of contention, especially in the UK. And if you don't believe me, head over onto either Instagram or X or onto the YouTube community tab, and you will see I've had a poll running on all three, and you will see very quickly no one can agree on whether the grooves should go upwards or downwards. And as I say, in today's video I'm going to explain the rationale behind us installing it with the grooves downwards, so smooth side up, and I'm also going to explain some of the pros and cons of either way so that you can decide for yourself the best way of doing it for your decking project. So I'll show you some official guidance about what way round decking should be installed later on, and I'll also show you the results of the polls. But I figured probably the best course of action is to explain why we went for grooves down, so smooth side up, because just because we did it this way doesn't mean that's the way you have to do it. So we had a couple of considerations when we obviously designed the extension, and we always planned to have an external deck area out here that flows through the bifold doors. And one of our primary objectives was that obviously we've got the oak flooring internally, and we wanted so that in summer when the bifolds are open, it almost looks like one continuous floor going all the way into the garden. And that's why we've got the deck boards running in that direction. And it's also why we just went for a natural finish on the decking, because we wanted it to closely match the oak flooring internally. But I'll tell you right now, trying to match your decking colour to your flooring colour is almost impossible, because it changes by time of the day depending on whether it's wet or dry, and obviously it silvers over time and things like that. So you're fighting a little bit of a losing battle if you do want to try and match decking to flooring. But keeping things natural with a clear oil works pretty well. It means that when the deck is wet, which it is most of the time, it is more or less the same colour as our floor. The other consideration we had, because we had a lot of people saying, why did we install a wooden deck at all? Why didn't we go for like paving stones or sandstone or something like that? And it's for one simple reason: the deck is at floor level. And if you start to install a permanent structure outside that would either breach your damp-proof course or be at the same level as your damp-proof course, that's potentially going to cause problems if you ever want to sell the property, because a surveyor isn't going to like the fact that a permanent structure outside isn't 150 millimeters lower than your DPC. Whereas decking, and especially with the big overhang that we've got on the roof, that's less of a concern. But we did have to take all of that into account in the design, and that's why our DPC is more or less at floor level. The only way around that really would be to have a step down onto a masonry patio area, but we didn't want the step down. We really wanted that flow from inside to outside, and it does work really, really well in the summer when the bifolds are open and you can just kind of trot out there, have your breakfast outside, and it does become kind of an extension of the living room area. And over time, as we start to get involved in a few more projects, maybe a pizza oven or lighting and things like that, this area is only going to get more and more used. So watch this space. And by the way, hopefully that also kind of addresses the point of why didn't we install the deck boards going from left to right, because there is kind of a vague argument that you should install it perpendicular to your general direction of travel to avoid slippage and things like that. But again, we wanted the direction of the boards to match the internal flooring. I don't think it's going to cause any issues in terms of slippage and things like that, as long as the deck is properly maintained, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later on as well. In terms of the deck potentially becoming slippy, well, any surface can have a build-up of algae if you don't maintain it. I'll show you in a minute, but I mean, there is no risk of slipping on this. Even when it's wet, it's like walking on wood, and whether you're walking kind of left to right or kind of along the direction of the grain, there is no real difference in how slippy it is as far as I can tell. But hey, I don't know, you could do a long-term study on it, I guess, and do maybe a future Test Tuesday video measuring the friction coefficient and things like that. But I think you're getting into kind of nuances that aren't really a problem there. And by the way, this is a concrete path on the sunny side of the garden, and as you can see, it's completely covered in moss and algae, and this would certainly become slippy in the winter time. So there's no getting away from the fact that whatever patio material you're going to use, especially on a north facing wall like that, it's going to need to be maintained. You can't just leave it. This would need to be jet washed from time to time to keep the moss away, as it is in this area here. I quite like the moss. So I'll cut to the chase on whether or not decking should be installed grooves up or grooves down. There's a very simple answer. You need to check with your decking manufacturer, because some are designed to be reversible and some aren't. In our case, this is reversible. You can install it either way around. It's completely a matter of preference, but most suppliers will tell you which way around it can be installed. To prove that, let's head over onto computer. So I mentioned in the installation video, ours is Arbor deck. I'm not that impressed by the quality, to be honest, but it does the job, I guess. And by the way, I think it probably goes without saying that if it's got grooves on both sides, then obviously it's reversible, probably. But here's the deck board that we're using, this particular one here, and you can see smooth and grooved reversible board. How about wicks? Try and find something vaguely similar size. We'll just randomly go for this one. Gah! And it doesn't seem to say. Jesus, wicks. How about this one? Gah! Reversible. I mean, that is dual profile. How about the good old Wix how-to guide? Oh, this is getting opened in Brave. I'm sick of this. Goodbye, cookie warnings. Sorry, this website's just too awful to find anything. How about Juicins? Oh, your website's died. B&Q, Snowden Timber Garden Treated Decking, similar size to what we've got, and this one doesn't seem to say whether or not it's reversible. So what I would do in that situation is try and get in touch with Snowden Timber and ask whether it matters which way round the decking goes. And finally, what about Travis Perkins? Well, again, they only seem to do decking that is obviously reversible because it's got the grooves on both sides. And obviously it goes without saying, if you go for an enhanced grip board with these kind of grippy bits on top, then obviously that's not reversible. But my point is, if it says it's reversible, then it's obviously reversible. And I know what you're going to say. I can hear you shouting at the screen from here. Calm down, it's only a deck. And no, we're not doing any very immature Australian dick jokes. But on the subject of whether or not you prefer your dick to be ribbed or smooth, there is a very common argument that the grooves are there to somehow allow airflow underneath the deck and to stop it kind of rotting away from the underside. But I just don't buy that. I think, again, on a north-facing deck like this, where there is always going to be moisture in the grooves underneath the board, getting trapped between the board and the joists, which we've obviously got the most expensive deck tape in the world on the joists, so hopefully they'll last. But yes, I get the argument for airflow underneath, but I reckon if you lifted any of these boards up, you would probably find moisture trapped between the deck tape and the underside of the boards. So I'm genuinely on the fence as to whether or not it would make any difference for the lifespan of your joists in the underside of the deck, whether it's that way round or that way round. If you prefer it ribbed, have it ribbed. Another benefit of installing the decking with the smooth side up is that it makes life much easier for either staining or oiling your deck, because you're not having to deal with all these little grooves in the wood. But there is an argument that you get better grip on the grooved side of the deck. But I'm really not 100% about that, because what tends to happen is that these little grooves fill up with water and detritus and like dirt and leaves and things like that, and over time you actually get a bigger buildup of algae in the grooves of the deck, and once the algae starts growing, it will happily grow across the top of the grooves, and that can make decking very slippy. You have to jet wash it off, use various chemicals and stuff to kill the algae, and I just think long term, smooth side up maybe we're missing a trick here in the UK. Maybe that's why our decking is so slippery and slidey, because on a smooth deck, you're not getting that build-up of detritus. It's much, much easier to clean and sweep it down or blow it down with a leaf blower or whatever. And hopefully over time, that'll just lead to the deck being less slippery with the grooves facing downwards. Who knows? Maybe I need to do a long-term test on this. So let's take a look at the poll results. We've got X over on the left, Instagram in the middle, YouTube on the right. And the way I've asked the question is I've tried to kind of segregate the UK, because obviously we're different over here. And for the UK audience, we're looking at 67% grooves up, 26% grooves down. But for the rest of the world, we're looking at roughly 50-50. 3% up, 3% down. And then if we head over to the YouTube audience, again 66% of UK folks are saying grooves up, 20% grooves down. But for the rest of the planet, you generally prefer smooth decking. And then we'll head to the Instagram poll in the middle here, because I want to talk about this one in a bit more detail because it supports my argument. And the interesting thing is here that yes, for the UK 60% are saying grooves up, but for the rest of the world 80% are saying grooves down. There is one other absolute telltale sign over whether or not the decking should be installed grooves up or grooves down, and that is that some decking will have a print on it, like a manufacturer's kind of print of code words and who it's made by and when it was produced and the tannalization that's been used in it and all that sort of thing. On this decking, it's actually printed on the end, which is a bit of a more logical place to put it, but I have seen it on the smooth surface of the wood on certain decking brands, and if that is printed on the smooth side of the decking, then that is a pretty good indicator that you need to install the decking with the smooth side pointing downwards, because obviously you don't want to see that writing. I mean, at the end of the day, when this tree grew, did it know it was going to become decking, and did it make one side slightly different to the other side? Obviously not. It's the same piece of wood, so I find it hard to believe that you would have any problems installing it with the smooth side up. But at the end of the day, you probably don't really want to be going around sanding off all of the markings that are on the surface of the wood. In that situation, just install it that way round or find a different brand of decking. In terms of maintenance, which I briefly mentioned earlier, just make sure that all the leaves and kind of detritus and rubbish on the decking is swept off regularly, well, at least once a year. If you don't leave all of that to kind of build up, you'll have much fewer problems with algae build-up, and it'll be much, much less slippery. Let me just put that back where it was. And I think the point that I'm trying to get across here is that it is really personal preference. My good buddy Charlie from Charlie DIY, linked down in the description, he's got most of his decking grooves up. We've seen from the survey results that most people in the UK have their decking grooves up. And we visited Belfast recently, and all of their promenades and all of the decking around the Titanic Museum, they've all got their decking grooves up. I mean, it does look like a hardwood decking, but you know, they built the Titanic over there. I kind of trust their judgment on decking. I think what we've also learned is that most timber merchants and DIY stores' websites are awful. Don't get me started on cookie warnings. It's one of my pet hates, and it's a subject that I've talked about at length over on my Small Business Toolbox channel. Oh, and another thing that's just sprung to mind as well, I have read this in numerous places, is that because we've had all these DIY shows like DIY SOS and like all these garden makeover programs on TV in the UK, apparently like Alan Titchmarsh and Charlie Dimmock and stuff like that are partially to blame for the craze of having decking facing upwards, because they did it like that on a lot of their garden remodeling projects, and therefore the whole UK kind of copied them. Is that the reason why most of our decking has the grooves facing up? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. The point is that there's no wrong or right answer. If the decking is obviously reversible, put it whichever way around you want. I'm going to run some long-term tests on actually these two pieces of wood here. I'm going to leave them out in the garden for a long time, one with the grooves facing upwards, one with the smooth side facing upwards, and we'll leave it and we'll come back to it in a couple of years and we'll see which one is the slimiest. So don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see that video and all of the forthcoming videos about the decking, where I'm going to talk about the finishes in a bit more detail, and I want to have a little chat about composite versus timber and a few other things as well. So do join me for those if that floats your boat. Don't forget to give me a follow on X, Gosforth Andy on X, Gosforth Handyman on Instagram. Let me know if you think I've forgotten anything. I think I've covered most stuff, but please do post down in the comments below, because we learn so much from each other on this channel from the comments on YouTube, and I love reading them. For now, folks, I hope you found that useful. Look after one another, be nice to each other. We shall see you next time. Tatty bye.